Hello and welcome to this tutorial of Spring. So this is probably the second video that you must be watching as if you're following the series, and as I said, you can visit srkplanet.wordpress.com any moment to go through or review the earlier discussions we had related to the topic. Okay, so let's continue on where we left. This was the diagram, the architecture that I drew, and we were discussing and we compared with this IOC container with servlet container. Like in case of servlet, we have the servlets over here, client requests through a specific URL pattern. The container looks for web.xml configuration, map that URL pattern to a specific class, and that class object is instantiated and returned back to the client. In the same manner, we have IOC containers in case of Spring that will be simply managing our plain old Java object, like a saving account, current account object. These are not servlet or not to any class which is extending a specific class or having some special feature, or plain old Java object POSOs, which are going to be managed by IOC container, and the configuration about the IOC specific objects which need to be instantiated by this container are written in configuration file, and the name of the file could be anything. So let's dig more into this and see what exactly this container has to offer. So I'm gonna start with architecture over here. Once again, just few things you need to know here. Like look here, assume this is your IOC container. Like I put a text over here to make it clear, IOC container from the Spring framework. What exactly does it do and why exactly we need it? As I said, you the developer is here. Okay, here are the developers. Okay, so what you do, you develop some components. Like suppose you have developed a component over here. This is your component, an implementation class that is being developed or written by you. Okay, some component, and this component that you have developed need to invoke a service. Like I say here, I am going to have a class object. Let's say we have general class over here. This is a service component. Like say here, this is a service component. This is going to be a simple class, plain old Java object having some business logic or functionality. Like in case of bank account, we are discussing, this is a savings account component, or it is going to be a current account service component. What you do in general as a developer, you write the class, an implementation class, where you invoke this functionality by instantiating the object of service classes. Like for instance, I can just give you an overview. Like you write a public class, I call it myComp. Okay, inside myComp, what do? You have some method like void myFunction, and in myFunction you create an object of service component. In like service component s equals to new service component dot dot dot. I hope you understand, and you just invoke some function like withdraw and kind of whatever you have declared over here. This is all you do in case of normal program or normal programming approach. But this what we don't want to do. Actually, we want this coupling between the service component and our component, normal component that we write for implementation. This coupling we need to reduce. So what we have, this IOC container, and what it is going to offer. Assume this is our service component, and this was our component, and this is service component. We have this IOC container in case of Spring. What it requires or it demands for is here a specific simple XML configuration file. Like I call it here, I am going to have a configuration file. Let's say something here, some bean.xml or anything you are free to name over here, no restriction. Like in case of where simple servlets, we have a restriction of web.xml. I call it bean.xml. This class contains description about this service component, and what does this IOC container will do? When a component need the functionality of another service component, this IOC container will read through the specific configuration file, how it is mapped or configured this component or this particular component classes. Reading this configuration, the container will manage the life cycle of the object needed by the code, the specific different objects or component. It will directly create an object over here representing your specific service component. After that, everything that it has to do is similar to what we have in case of servlet container, quite similar. Like servlet container, in case of servlet container, you have client make request for a servlet, they just know the pattern, URL pattern. When they type in the URL pattern, http://localhost / like say my servlet is written inside configuration file, in that case deployment descriptor. That URL pattern is mapped to a class, an object of the class is created, and service method is executed and written back to the clients. Here is something similar happening, and why I'm comparing it with servlet container, to make you understand the importance of IOC container. The services provided by servlet container reduces lot of the tasks that you need to do over here as a developer. You don't have to think about when to create the object, when to destroy it from the memory on the server, when you have to manage the transaction, when you have to manage the security, when you have to do filtering, when you have to do threading. All these tasks are handled in that case by the servlet container. So it will be handled by the IOC container. The features are not similar, not all the features that I was talking about right now will be followed, but in the soon in coming tutorial you will see what services it is has to offer. Okay, so but basically I can say right now, this IOC container is nothing but a factory of object. It's like a container that is holding objects, and whenever someone needs the particular object, it will give you back the object. And in this case, the object that we have inside the IOC container, which are instantiated after reading the configuration, is known as managed bean or managed object in general. We can use the term over here, let me write it, managed beans. Let me decrease the font a bit here, I think, so that okay. Now, so what exactly I mean to say this is that managed bean are nothing but objects that are created inside our IOC container in case of Spring Framework, and all that Spring Framework has to offer you is a mechanism, a technique by which you can look up this managed bean inside IOC container rather than looking it directly for the service component. Rather than creating the object here in your code, direct having the coupling, you use some lookup method. Like in case of JNDI, you have a mechanism where you can look up for object or for a resource by the name. Similarly, either by using name or by using a type, class type, you can simply invoke a specific object, and that particular object will be served by the IOC container. Something like here, I'm gonna say that this particular object is going to be invoked by one of my component. So whenever I need to get an object, this is the service component, this is my component. Rather than just going for the service component directly, I would rather write a configuration for the object in the configuration file, and using the IOC container or simply the container of the Spring Framework, I will instantiate the bean reading the configuration inside container, and I will access it. And as many components I have where I need to use it, a managed object will be written back to the various component. So this is just an overview or high level diagram or architecture of the container. So basically, let me dig inside this and show you some sample code. But before that, the thing is like you should be understanding all these things which we are discussing, and the concept of this particular container in terms of what it is providing. You can generally see here and say it is nothing but a kind of factory over here. It is producing something and providing it to us. So I guess the term factory need to be made clear over here. Okay, so let's write and discuss this here. Something here, the term we call bean factory, and it is following the principle, or you can say the patterns known as the factory pattern, the very famous pattern we have in the industry. So let's see here what exactly I'm talking and what this factory pattern has to do with all these things. Actually, when you see or when you look carefully at this IOC container, what exactly it is, it's containing a lot of objects inside it, and whenever someone needs a particular component, it provides you directly, or rather I should switch over here only that it will be clear for you. So you can see that following the factory pattern, it produces the particular beans and it gives it back to you. In the similar manner, what we have here, that in case of real world, like when we need some object, when we need some product, we approach some retailer to the retail stores and we request for such kind of products. rather than purchasing the components individually and binding it together to produce that particular product to satisfy our need. What do? We visit specific retail stores where we have industry manufactured or factory manufactured ready-made products available, and we just purchase it. The same kind of thing is happening over here. Okay, I think it will become more clear what exactly I'm talking about when I show you some code. So basically, let's start over here with some configuration of the Spring framework, and let's see. So I have Eclipse over here. What exactly you need is the framework that need to be downloaded. So let's visit Google, and I guess that is the better approach to get the latest version of any software. I cannot recommend you any link or URL over here, because by the time you're watching this video, that keeps on changing or upgrading. So simply you type over here Spring Framework download. Okay, so what exactly the URL you are getting for springsource.org/download would be the place where you can get the latest, that is 3.1.0 for the Spring framework. And as I'm saying, I cannot give you a direct link like springsource.org.download. After 2 or 3 months from this, from today, if you're watching this video, this might be purchased by Oracle or some other corporation, and the URL is going to be completely changed. So your friend, this Google, never changes. At least in my career of 5 to 6 years, I haven't seen the Google results to be changed. Interface of course keeps on changing, but Google result never changed. You type in the keyword, it will give you nearly the thing that you are looking for, almost. So here and you know the basic principle, the process how to download. So I'm not gonna download it. It's around 50 to 90 MB. That will take time. I already downloaded it. So you just go for the latest release. That would be recommendation from my side. Just click on the download, fill in the form, and you will be able to reach the download link. So here in our case, what I'm gonna have is this Spring framework. Here I have already downloaded it. You can see here, when you extract the Spring downloaded file, you will get a Spring Framework 3.1.1 release, the latest one. And here is the interesting part, dist distributed folder that contains all the library required by an application to support the Spring based infrastructure or framework. Besides this, you need an additional specific jar file, that is common logging, which you can find over here from the Apache's website. And don't worry, I will upload these library files on the blog itself, so it will not be difficult for you to search here and there. So download separately. I have named this folder common logging. This is required for logging the specific messages that are being generated during the application being compiled. Okay, so we require this library, and let's begin over here. So this was our Eclipse. We earlier have developed this polymorphic test application. Let's forget about it. Now start with here. So what you require is simply a project. Simple plain old Java objects in our project will do the task over here. But before beginning, what I need that Eclipse to be configured to use the Spring framework. As I'm going to develop lot more project, 2, 3, 4, 5 project. Every time I create a project, I need to add those specific set of libraries which I showed you just now in the dist folder. All this library need to be added for every application that has to be supported by the Spring framework. So there in Eclipse we have a feature of creating user defined libraries where we can keep all our jar files and archives at one place, and any project can be referenced through those libraries to support that infrastructure of framework. So how you create a user library in Eclipse is the first thing you need to know. Come to Windows, Preferences, then you come to here, Java build path. Here, sorry, like say I want to create a user library, I can just type in here user libraries. Okay, you can see Java build path user libraries. You click on new and give a name to your library, like I say here Spring library, and click on OK. When you have the Spring library over here, a user defined library, click on add jar and select all the jar file that need to be part of your specific Spring framework. So as I said, the Spring framework 3.1.1, come over here to dist folder and select all the files that you have here. Okay, all the necessary files except one that I said you need to add separately or to be downloaded separately. So once again you can see add jar is disabled right now. You need to click on the library again to make it enable add jars to add another set of library. Just moving one level up, and here I have a download separate folder. I have common loggings that need to be added. I can show you that if you don't add it, it will just simply throw an exception to what you were stating, that loggings framework is not there and the application cannot be built. Okay, so this is what we did, is just configured Eclipse to have a storage area in which all necessary jar or required libraries for Spring are stored. Every time we create a project, we can make use of that library. We can make our project to refer to that library. So let's start over here. Right click on blank area, new, and just say Java project. Okay, so I go for other, as the current perspective is Java E, so Java project are not available. I click on Java project. Just call it Spring 01, the very first project. Rest of the things you can leave as it is. Next, and click finish. It asks you to change the perspective to normal Java perspective rather than having EE, Enterprise Edition perspective. Click yes, and your perspective would be changed, and the common palettes, the common windows that you require in case of normal Java application will be available. Let me minimize that. Okay, so here first thing to have the libraries, and I don't need to add libraries again and again as I have created or configured a library repository. So I right click on my project, I come to properties, then I go to the Java build path. There I need libraries, so I come to library. You can see every project in Java that you create has JRE system library already available. How exactly it is available? When you install Eclipse or you configure Eclipse, at that moment only you have configured Java standard edition libraries. That's why with every project it follows. Now you have created your own customized library and you need this application project to have that libraries. So you come over here, add library, and you select here user library, because it is created by users, not the existing library that we have pre-built or inbuilt comes with the Eclipse. So we select the user library, click next, and we choose this library. If you remember, this is the library that we have created. If you at this moment, if you want to create some new library, like suppose along with the Spring you want to give support for Hibernate and you haven't configured it, now you just go to user library and create a new one. I will explain it later. Click finish. Now you have Java runtime and as well as you have Spring libraries. Hit OK. So you can see Spring libraries, all the jars are available required to build a simple project in Spring. So let's start with creating a package. So new, and I say package com.wordpress.srkplanet. Okay, this would be the package. Here let's say, taking again the same example that I will extend further to explain other concepts in Spring, I'm going to create an account class. Okay, so I have an account class that is nothing but this component. I'm going to talk about this service component that I'm going to create is account. Right now, just for understanding, I'm creating a method over here, withdraw, and let's say it has got some implementation in terms like it says welcome to XYZ bank account. Fine, just save it. So I have a class over here. Now next what we do, we write an implementation, and I'm writing is or creating it in the same project or in the same package, but in actual practice what we have service component located or created by some other developer or some other machine on the network, or it's somewhere else located in the world, doesn't matter. We are going to create this implementation to invoke or access this service component. Okay, so I'm going to create an implementation account class, and this is going to have main method. Let's say finish. So generally, how do you access this account class and its method? You simply say account class object AC equals to new account, and you say AC dot function name withdraw. Okay, that's it. What you do in normal practice, you right click on it, you run as, and go for the Java application, and just you can see welcome to XYZ bank account. But what I explained, I'm not going to repeat that there is a huge coupling, a tight coupling between these two components or number of components if you go for this approach. So rather I will comment out this code. I'm going for an XML based configuration describing my specific object that will be contained in the IOC container and will be provided to the implementation class by Spring Framework infrastructure. So let's start building that. What I require here, let's see the diagram. So rather than my implementation component invoking the service component account class directly, I need this bean.xml, and this container is already there. We'll come to this. So we need this configuration file, that is an XML. So let's come over here, new, other, and type over here XML file, next, and you're free to name it anything you like, but just to make it simple I name it beans.xml. okay, hit finish. So you're gonna have this simple XML file. Come to the source, and there you can see the XML file. And as if you remember, well, while creating a lot of strut based configuration files or simple servlet or JSP based web configuration file for your deployment descriptor, what you do, the first and foremost thing that you do is you specify a DTD or an schema, because it's rule that XML file should be well formed as well as validated at the same time. For validation we have some predefined DTDs and schema, and DTD, as it has become older approach to use DTD as it doesn't offer much of the data type supports, so that's why we avoid using it. But it's still in 3.1.1 the version we are using, we can make use of this specific DTD schema, and then schema. Both we will see both the approach. So let's begin here with DTD. And what the DTD, you are not supposed to remember that. It's always available and provided by the service provider or specific the framework provider. So let's come over here, the Spring Framework which you have downloaded. Just go and search for an application context.xml file. Okay, this application context.xml file is supplied as part of the distribution that you have downloaded. Any one of this file, you just open it. Okay, and after opening it you need to just have that DTD declaration at the top, nothing else. So here I copy this DTD declaration and I just need to paste it over here in my file. And I would recommend you that not to use this DTD, it has become old approach. Rather use the schemas, which I will show you next just after this example, and it is recommended approach. So once you have this DTD declaration in an XML file, it clearly indicates that org.springframework.web.portlet context and its related tag will be supported and are validated. So first tag is the beans tag that we declare. Just try to understand what exactly I'm trying to achieve in the result. I will explain each and everything. Here I have a bean tag which contains an ID. I say ACZ is the name of the object that need to be created or instantiated inside the container. Next is the class that I need to specify full qualified class name, com.wordpress.srkplanet.account. It should be correct, com.wordpress.srkplanet.srk. Okay, that's all what we need for now. It's something similar to, if you have learned Struts framework, it is something very similar to declaration. But if it is not clear to you, I will explain it. It's very simple. A simple element being declared inside the root element beans, which contains an ID and class property. But this is very meaningful to the framework. We'll come to it. Okay, so let's come to the implementation class and how we are going to access this. Now, as if you refer to the diagram, this component will be not accessed directly, but it will be accessed via this IOC container. IOC container means a Spring Framework. What exactly it provides you? The container. This is Spring Framework through which you are going to invoke this service component is providing, that is the framework is providing you certain specific interfaces and classes to access those specific managed bean when they are loaded inside the container. For one of this interface which I am going to talk about is bean factory that resides in org.springframework. Let me write it for you. org.springframework.beans.factory. Okay, and if you don't remember this namespace, long namespaces, what exactly you can do, you can just make help of this Eclipse IDE to make the import for you. Okay, so let's start with here. I need to create a variable or reference type of this interface, and I will use in conjunction with this bean factory XML bean factory class. I will instantiate it, which further demands for a file system resource. This file system resource is similar to your java.io package containing file input stream classes, which will refer to a file in certain location over the network or in your local machine system also. So the name of the file is beans.xml. That is in the same directory where I have my source code, so I don't need to specify full qualified path over here. Rather, this file will be searched in your current project location, and it will be given as an input to XML Bean Factory, whose reference will be taken by Bean Factory that I was talking over here when I said the second diagram. You can see over here Bean Factory. So rather than explaining you most of the theoretical thing, I decided to come up with the practical first. So now why this is underlined, because I haven't made import for these classes, like only I have imported org spring framework beans.factory. So it's better to make use of the IDE over here. Just point your mouse over here, wait for some time, look here, org spring framework .beans.factory.xml. you first make an import for that. Now you can see the errors disappeared. For file system resource also, specifically Spring Framework's file system core IO packages need to be imported. org.springframework.core.io. So what you see here, that specifically these specific packages, let me minimize it, are imported by the help of IDE, but still you can see some orange line over here. It indicates this class is deprecated. You point a mouse and read the type XML Bean Factory is deprecated. There is another approach of accessing these specific beans or invoking this bean, or simply look up for the bean, is done through another class application context, which we will be talking next. Okay, so let's see here. So I have a factory, this Bean Factory, which is holding the reference of or has instantiated our classes based on this configuration. Now what do you need to do? You have another method here, get bean, inside this Bean Factory interface, which helps you load the object. Let me show you. Factory dot get bean. Here it takes two types of argument, either the type of the class or the name of the object. So better is to, or recommended is to, use the name of the class, the same you have declared here in your configuration file, ACC. So I just name it ACC, and what it's gonna return is generic object. For that object need to be typecasted into a specific type, like account type. So what I'm gonna do, I write account object A account. Okay, and this I'm gonna cut here and paste it, sorry, equals to here. So what does it mean? We have referred to this file, we have read this file using file system resource. After that we have given it as an input to XML Bean Factory, which further returns an handler to the Bean Factory, the manager, which is going to instantiate your object based on the configuration written in this file. Once it instantiates the object, like here we have manage bean, reading this configuration bean.xml or whatever the name of XML, service component will be initialized at runtime into the container. Objects will be created, and via making help of the factory, you are reading this object back into the application. You are having an object of type this service component over here. Once you have the object, what do you do? Play with it. Just call the method withdraw here. So now let's test this code, what exactly is gonna happen. You can see yourself now. I'm just going to execute run as Java application, executed. Welcome to XYZ bank account. Whoa, same output that you got earlier with using the normal classical approach. That is not recommended, and this time you can see your component account is not coupled with your implementation class. You don't have any kind of object instantiation over here. Neither you have to think about object creation, destruction, calling the methods, service methods, or kind of thing like security or filtering. This filtration will be offered in Spring by using AOP, that we'll talk soon. So all of the thing is going to be managed by this means. You can have a look over here, the diagram again and again. Like we have service component, we are the developer, we develop the components. What we do, we write some configuration, or is will be written by the service component writer or developer, and using the container, Spring Framework does all the task for you. You just know about, or you just have to understand about this interface, Bean Factory, or I'll soon introduce a context also, and you just play with this object. You do whatever you want. You don't have to think about at runtime how the object is going to be retrieved, what exactly is going to be the a specific typecasting thing and kind of thing you have to do that we have discussed in polymorphism. At runtime, object will be made available to you. At the same time, I said there is another approach rather than passing the name, cause sometimes names are going to be create confusion, kind of like when you type in a string, it's capital, small, and kind of like case sensitivity will be there. So another approach is also there. Let me show you. You create an object of type account, you call the factory object get bean, and this is class. You type or you pass a type of that class, account dot class. This is also an approach that you can use over here. Let me show you first output, then I will talk about the disadvantage of this approach. XYZ bank account. The disadvantage that type this particular approach is that in this case you can have only one object of the particular type declared in your configuration file. If suppose I have more than one object, like let me show you. If I have for the same class I have two objects, I can have n number of objects required as per the requirement. And now if I try to execute this program, there will be a confusion. What confusion? You are trying to invoke through this bean factory. You are asking in this configuration file, read if there is an account class and return the object. Now there are two objects and a Spring container won't be able to decide which to return. In that case it will throw you an exception. Just check it out in this type. What happens? Some exception. And you can see over here, loading XML bean definition from that file, something something, and what it says, no unique bean of type. It should be unique. It is a criteria that need to be understood. But rather, as I have given two different names for the object, ACC and SCC1, as two objects cannot have the same name, if I use this string based approach, I could have called one of the objects like uncommented, and now see here, I am referring to ACC this time, and this will be invoked. Welcome to XYZ Bank, and if I am invoking the SCC1 object also, it would be invoked. Okay, so one more thing here, when you are declaring your objects over here, simply classes you are having and you are providing the objects over here, you cannot have two objects with the same name in this XML file. This rule will be enforced over here using this DTD. Let me show you. Just name it ACC, try and save it. Okay, so what happens at the time you try to compile it or execute it, or what will happen, that it will complain, it will throw an error towards you saying two beans cannot have the same ID. This rule will be enforced to you with the help of or by this simple DTD declaration in the XML. This is what validation of XML is called. And as I said, beside using DTD, we have another approach of using schemas, and that would be the recommended approach rather than using this twice. So let me explain you that approach also here only, because in the coming video series I am going to use schema only. I am not going to rely on this DTD as it's not recommended industry approach. So where exactly you can get that specific schema, like that schema declaration, you can find online also, like in the Spring case here you can, as there is no example file provided with that schema declaration yet, so I can write a Spring framework schema. Okay, actually my internet connection is a bit slow, that's why I just have this file over here. You can have a look over here, Spring schema, and I just downloaded it from the Spring website. You're free to download it from there. Okay, you just need this XSD declaration here. You copy it and you come to Eclipse. Rather than having this DTD, what you need to do, this bean tag is going to be provided inside your schema. Let me show you here. This is the beans tag, okay, and this is the closing for the bean tag, and inside this beans tag what we are having, a certain declaration of XML namespaces and some schema location. Although the schema location is not mandatory, you can remove it, but let it be as we have copied it from the internet, and it should be. And now what you see, the change here underlining, as soon as you have implemented the schema, this particular file is validated by the IDE itself, and it is reporting an error here. The value CCC of attribute ID on element bean is not valid with respect to type ID. Why? Because it is already declared. Like suppose I just cut it and say it's alright. If I declare it again, I get an error. But if you remember, in DTD this was not happening. Although I said when you execute the program it will throw an error stating that this is not a valid XML document. But you can see here schemas are so powerful and they provide you this validation right here only. So better go with the schema approach, and this you don't have to remember mug-up, you just can download it, you can have it as a sample file, and here on the blog also you can find in the sample file this schema and DTD both as one sample I will be providing over here. Okay, so that's all we need to discuss for now, and I guess you understand how this particular framework, this architecture is working. In case if you have any doubt or query, you just post it below the video on the srkplanet.wordpress.com. I'll be answering all the queries. Thank you.